Hello, this is lecture 4 of the computational methods course, and in this lecture we'll be covering two topics. The first is to do with random numbers and the other is to do with minimization of functions. Maximization or minimization. We'll see that the same methods work for both cases. If you want to look this up in some book, you can look at Newman's book. So there's section 6.4 which discusses minimization, and then there's chapter 10 which discusses random numbers. Or you can also look at numerical recipes, chapters 7 and 10. And in general, you'll find lots of other books also which will discuss these topics. So you should be able to find enough material online. So first question is, why exactly do we care about random numbers? Why do we want to generate random numbers? There are numerous reasons why we might want to do that. First of all, suppose we want to do some statistical studies. So for example, suppose here is a nice Gaussian distribution. I hope you have seen Gaussian distributions in some statistics course at some point. Anyway, it's a distribution that it's very well behaved and it's very well understood. It has a peak at some point. And suppose you're interested in seeing how you can generate random numbers. How you want to generate numbers with this distribution. So you want to generate some numbers which will be more closely spaced close to this midpoint. Let's call it mu. So you want numbers which are more over here but fewer over here. For statistical studies, if you want to calculate means, variances, etc. So for these kind of statistical studies, if you want to generate numbers with this distribution, you want to do it randomly. You want to take a random sample of numbers which have this particular distribution. So for studies of that sort, you might want to generate random numbers. You might want to do a study of errors in whatever experiment that you are doing. So one way to simulate the error would be to take a random number distribution, again, which might look like this Gaussian distribution over here. So suppose you are trying to measure some length. Let's say the length is supposed to be 5 centimeters, but there will be some fluctuations because of your instrumentation, because of your technique, whatever it is, and there will be some error bar, let's say 0.1. So you want to model how your measurements are distributed relative to 5. So over here, for example, this might be 5 centimeters. And then you want to see how often is it that you're getting 4.9, how often are you getting 5.1, and so on. So again, to simulate these kind of errors, you might want to do, you can only generate random numbers. It's not just to do with measurement errors. Very often in physics, chemistry, etc., we come across systems which are inherently stochastic. What does stochastic process mean? It means it's a process whose outcome is not determined exactly. So you can only calculate or you can only predict some probability of a process occurring, and that is called a stochastic process. So if you want to study stochastic processes, in certain cases things might happen with a certain probability, things might not happen with a certain probability. So then again you can use random numbers to model those processes. So what are some examples of stochastic processes that you can think of? For example, nuclear decay. You have studied in your 12th standard that nuclear decay happens with certain probability, but you can't exactly pinpoint when a given nucleus is going to decay. You can only say that it follows this law of radioactive decay, it's going to exponentially fall. But exactly which nucleus is going to decay, that is not known. So it happens statistically. So if you want to model that kind of a system, you can use random numbers. Not just nuclear decay, in general, when you study quantum mechanics, you will see any quantum mechanical process is inherently probabilistic. So you can only predict probabilities of outcomes. You cannot predict with certainty what the outcome is going to be. So again, for modeling these things, uh, you can use random numbers. And then finally, they also have tremendous applications in numerical algorithms. And we are going to see applications of this towards doing integration and doing minimization. So these are some of the applications for random numbers. Uh, Possibly more as well. You can find some resources online which will discuss them. So first question is, what do we mean exactly by a random number? So random number means a number which you could not have predicted. You could not, if you have a real random number generator, it means that it will always surprise you. It will give you some number which there is no way for you to guess what that number is going to be. So typically, if you ask a computer program to give you a series of n random numbers, x1, x2, x3, and so on, it means that if you know x1, that doesn't necessarily mean that you know x2. In fact, you should not be able to say what x2 is. That is what true randomness would mean. That x1, x2, x3, these are all completely uncorrelated. There is no relation between them. But you can see a problem over here. We are trying to generate random numbers using a computer program. Like when you ask a computer system to generate a random number, there is some algorithm which does this. Now, if there's an algorithm, it means the computer is following certain steps to generate the random number. And then how is it possible that you cannot predict what the next random number is going to be? If there is an algorithm, then if you know x1, you should be able to predict x2 based on that. If you know x2, you should be able to predict x3 based on that. So therefore, if you're using a computer program, an algorithm, it is not possible to generate a true random number because the computer will use some algorithm to generate it. Instead, what we use in computers are called pseudo-random numbers. Pseudo-random numbers just means that it's going to be extremely difficult for you to predict what the next number is going to be. It is not impossible because it's coming from some algorithm, but within reasonable limits, it's really hard. It's almost impossible to predict what the next number will be. So that is what we call a pseudo-random number generator. And the more difficult it is to guess what the next number will be, the better we will say is the pseudo-random number generator. And in general, for the purposes of our discussion and in general in books and everywhere, we just use the word random numbers, although we actually mean pseudo-random numbers. So there are various ways of generating pseudo-random numbers. One way is to, so one very common and very simple algorithm to generate pseudo-random numbers is to write something of this form. Xn plus 1 is a xn plus b modulo m, where a, b, and m are all very large integers. So when you write something like this, so if a, b, m, these are all something like millions or billions, then with any reasonable expectation, it's not possible to find out what the remainder is going to be. Do you know this mod function? This basically tells you what is the remainder of axn plus b when you divide it by m. So if these numbers are all very large, then calculating these remainders is not a trivial job. And therefore, you can say that these xi's are like random numbers. Another way of generating pseudo-random numbers is to somehow use the processor time. So the exact time at which you have asked the computer to generate the random number, that is used, and using that they generate some numbers using algorithms. Uh, so that is another way of generating pseudo-random numbers. It's not uh, it's not necessarily a bad thing for these numbers to be pseudo-random instead of truly random, because since it is pseudo-random, which means you can generate them using some algorithm, what that means is that you can reproduce the same set of random numbers. Means if you run your same code twice, you might get the same set of random numbers again. And that's a good thing because it allows you to check your code. Suppose the numbers were truly random. So each time that you ran your program, you would get a completely different set of random numbers. And then suppose there is some problem in your code. You would not be able to find that problem again because you would not get that same sequence of random numbers a second time. But because they are pseudo-random, you can insist that you get the same set of random numbers, and by doing that you can troubleshoot your problem. So if you're finding a problem at some point, you can again generate the same set of pseudo-random, change your program a little bit, again use the same set of pseudo-random numbers, then again change your program a little bit, put the same set of pseudo-random numbers. That allows you to debug your program, allows you to find where there are some possible sources of errors. So pseudo-random numbers are good in that sense because they allow you to debug your program. Okay. How do we generate random numbers in Python? So there is the random package. So then you will have to say something like import random. Uh, and then there are functions within this. So there's one function called random, which will just generate random numbers between 0 and 1. And this is the one that we are going to be using most often. But there is also the function randrange, which generates a random number between m and n. You can also use a randrange with 3 arguments, and this gives you numbers between m and n in steps of k. So depending on what you want to do, you might find different functions useful. Okay. And there are lots of different algorithms for generating random numbers themselves, and you can read about a bunch of them, at least in the numerical recipes book. There's a very detailed discussion on some of them. We won't discuss that over here because in this course we are not particularly concerned with how to generate the random numbers themselves, which is a whole big field in itself. It's just that's not the focus over here. We are going to be focusing on using random numbers for various applications. So if you are interested in how to generate them in the first place, please look at the book. We're going to look at some applications over here. The first application is to do integration, numerical integration using random numbers. So there's a special name for this. It's called Monte Carlo integration. In general, a lot of techniques, numerical techniques that make use of random numbers are given the name Monte Carlo. So Monte Carlo simulation, Monte Carlo integration, Monte Carlo minimization, and so on and so forth. This name Monte Carlo comes from the name of a famous casino in Monaco, where basically you can imagine how at a casino rules of statistics, probability, random numbers, etc. might play an important role. So I think it was Metropolis or Hastings, one of these two people who gave the name Monte Carlo to these kinds of techniques. So let's see what Monte Carlo integration is about. Idea is actually very simple, much simpler than even trapezoid or Simpson's rule. Suppose I have some function f of x, I want to integrate this between a and b. So what I can do is, first of all, let me draw a box which completely encloses this function. So I'm going to, so of course from between a and b the box has to be, let's draw this box over here. So this of course is a, this is b, and on the y-axis let's call this m1 and m2. Then you will notice that the box that we have drawn has an area. It's just a rectangle, so it's b minus a times m2 minus m1. This is the area of the box, and this function is inside this. What I can do is I can generate random numbers. I will generate x and y random numbers. So let's, and I'll put them in an ordered pair, xi and yi. So no wait. So I'll generate random numbers xi between a and b, and I'll generate random numbers yi between m1 and m2. So if I write them as ordered pairs xi yi, then this represents some point inside this box. So I might get a point over here, I might get a point here, point here, point here, etc. These are all random points somewhere inside this rectangle. Think of this as some kind of a dartboard, and I'm a very bad darts player. So when I throw my darts at this board, it might fall anywhere inside this box. Now some of those points are going to lie under the curve, some of them are going to lie over the curve. And the ratio, so the ratio of the number of points under the curve divided by n total, this is the total number of points that I have put. This just has to be proportional to the areas. So n under the curve is just the integral, and n tot is just proportional to the total area of the whole box, right? Because integral is just area under the curve, and because these are uniformly distributed random numbers which are, I have no control over where they will lie, the ratio of the areas has to be equal to the ratio of the points that lie inside them. So that is it. Then the integral which I want is just the points which fall under the curve divided by the total number of points multiplied by the area. I know area because I know b, a, m1, m2, and I know the total number of points that I have thrown in. Typically you have to use some large number, something like 10,000, million, billion, and each time I'm going to count how many of those points. Every time I choose a point, I have to check whether it lies under the curve or not. How do I check that? So if x and y satisfy the condition, yi has to be less than f of xi. Because if y is less than f of x, then it lies under the curve. If y is greater than f of x, then it lies over the curve. So if this condition is satisfied, then count this point in and under. So that's straightforward way. It's just a question of generating random numbers which will lie inside this rectangle, and then checking if that point lies under the function or not. If it doesn't lie under the function, never mind. If it lies under the function, you count it as n under, and then in the end, you just using this formula, you can approximate what the integral is going to be. Of course, the larger the number of points that you choose, the more accurate your answer will become. But what can we say about the error in this method? It turns out that actually for most usual integrals, it is better to use your trapezoid or the Simpson's rule, because the error in these two is a lot less than the error in Monte Carlo. Let's check why that is the case. So the probability of a point lying under the curve when you pick a random number, let's call it small p, this is just going to be I divided by a, because integral divided by the total area. Now suppose out of your n tot points, what did we call it, n tot, yeah, let's say k of them lie under the curve, then or n tot minus k lie over it. Then the probability distribution of getting k points to lie under the curve while n total minus k lie over the curve is given by n total c k p to the k 1 minus p to the n tot minus k. This comes from something called the binomial distribution, which maybe you have seen in your data analysis course, maybe. If not, we will discuss it when we are discussing statistics in the next math methods course. So anyway, so this is the probability of choosing k of the points out of n total points, such that uh, with probability p you have k, and with probability 1 minus p you have n tot minus k of the points. And for this distribution, the error, which is basically the standard deviation for this distribution, is going to be n total times p times 1 minus p square root. This again comes from the properties of the binomial distribution. In case you're not familiar with how to do this calculation, no, you should be okay. So given the last lecture in which we discussed how to calculate standard deviation, variance, etc., this should be doable. So if this is your probability distribution, call it P of k, then it should be possible for you to calculate what the variance should be, because variance will just be average of square minus square of average. So with this particular probability distribution, so you can calculate and check that this is going to be the standard deviation for this particular case. Let's put over here p is I over a, this one. So you will get this error to be approximately, why do I say approximately, equal. But now so basically what we are seeing is this is proportional to square root of n total. However, the integral, if you look at it over here, is a n total divided by n under So the error in the integral has to be a by n y a sorry n under, okay, that's why this wasn't working, right, times the error in the n under, but error in the n under is just given by this. So this is a divided by n total times square root of n total times whatever, square root of blah blah blah, which means that it is inversely proportional to the square root of n total. So this is the important point to note over here, that the error goes as 1 over square root n total. So if you increase the number of points by a factor of 100, you are only going to gain a factor of 10 in reducing the error. On the other hand, if you remember from Simpson and trapezoid, in trapezoid I think the error was proportional to h square, which is 1 over n square, and in Simpson's, remind me if I'm wrong, I think it was proportional to h to the 4, was it? H to the 5 in fact. Okay, and this was also h cubed. No, h squared. So proportional to 1 over n to the 5. So you can see that uh, the error falls a lot quicker for trapezoid and Simpson than it does for this Monte Carlo integration. So it's much more efficient to use these methods than to use Monte Carlo. So then why do we care about Monte Carlo integration? Well, there are a few special cases where it's much better to use Monte Carlo integration. So for example, suppose your function is a rapidly varying one. So for example, in the book there is this example of f of x as sine square 1 over x times 2 minus x, and you want to integrate this from 0 to 2. Now between 0 and 2, if I plot this function, it looks something like this. So between 0 and 2, so in the middle it looks like this, and then it starts to oscillate faster on both sides. So now how are you going to do this using trapezoid or Simpson? Basically, as you go towards 0, as you approach 0 or 2, the oscillations become arbitrarily fast and they become arbitrarily close to each other. So what is going to be the step size that you will choose? No matter what step size you choose, you will always be missing out on certain rapid oscillations at the extreme edge of it. So in a situation like this, it can be useful to use Monte Carlo integration, because now all you will do is you will throw some points inside this. Oops. What is this? No, thank you. So just throwing points randomly inside this box. and then counting how many points fall under the curve, how many points fall over the curve. So in a case like this, it's actually better to use Monte Carlo integration instead of taking any kind of method which requires you to have steps of some finite size. Another place where you might find it useful to do this is when you're doing integration over many variables. So this is called a multi-dimensional integration. Suppose you have some function of x, y, and z, and you need to integrate this over x, y, and z. Now the thing is, if you're trying to use something like Simpson or trapezoid, so normally suppose you want to take some n, let's say around 100 points to do your integration, but now because you have three variables x, y, and z, you will need 100 points along x, 100 points along y, 100 points along z. So already you have 10 to the power 6 points. So if you're doing a multi-dimensional integration, it might be easier to work with Monte Carlo. Typically, rule of thumb is that if the dimension of your space is more than 4, then Monte Carlo is better. So if you're trying to integrate over more than 4 variables, then preferably use Monte Carlo instead of trapezoid or Simpson. Also, so if you're trying to do an integration over a space which has some very weird geometry, so you're trying to find out the area of this thing, it's going to be very difficult to first write this as some fixed function and then try to integrate it. But it's easy to do it using Monte Carlo, because just draw a box around it and start throwing points inside, and whatever points fall inside, that is proportional to the area or the volume of this figure. So these are some of the reasons why you might want to use a Monte Carlo integration rather than plain trapezoid or Simpson kind of rule.